Hello everyone, this is Douster and welcome to another episode review for Dark Side of the Ring, and in this video it talks about the plane ride that had WWE wrestlers go crazy. This episode was very controversial when it came out. A lot of YouTubers who reviewed it got a lot of negativity when talking about certain people who might have done bad stuff in that plane. Whether these allegations are true or not, it was a pretty big deal when it came out. I'll go over the episode first and share my thoughts at the end. I'll start from the beginning before it all goes down. The WWE was called WWF, World Wrestling Federation, before they removed the F. Vince McMahon had just bought their former competition WCW along with ECW. Some of the wrestlers from WCW and ECW were signed to WWF. ECW had a storyline with WWF as they were assaulting them after ECW was bought. Around May of 2002, WWF had a 4-day European tour, as well as a pay-per-view called Insurrection that took place in London, England. It was broadcasted in the United Kingdom only and was the last event that ran with the WWF name before the change. They had to change the WWF due to the other WWF, World Wildlife Fund. After the pay-per-view was over, the WWF wrestlers and staff took flight Boeing 757 in order to go back to the US and be ready for Raw the following day. The flight was expensive, luxurious, huge, and came with an open bar. Wrestlers in the plane, as far as we know, were Stone Cold Steve Austin, Brock Lesnar, The Undertaker, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Ric Flair, Goldust, Vince McMahon, and his wife Linda. One of the flight attendants, named Heidi Doyle, worked on that flight. Before takeoff, the plane was delayed for 7 hours, so everyone on board stayed in their seats or went to the bar. The alcohol was starting to run out before the plane had taken off. Terri Runnels, who was also on the flight, said that the plane felt as though it was filled with drunk high school guys. Once the plane had finally taken off, the wrestlers were already drunk on flight. Some wrestlers spiked their co-workers' drinks, because in the early 2000s and before that, wrestlers used drugs such as Placidyls and Halcium for whatever use they wanted, mostly to treat their injuries. Michael Hayes supposedly had his drink filled with Halcium by someone and ends up hitting Bradshaw's head, as Bradshaw had a busted head that was treated only to be wounded again. Michael then passes out and X-Pac cuts off Hayes' ponytail and holds it as if he won a title in the WWF. Meanwhile, Curt Hennig, also known as Mr. Perfect, was known to be a prankster among his co-workers and puts shaving cream on Brock Lesnar's head. Lesnar then chased Hennig throughout the airplane angry. They weren't the only ones causing chaos, as other wrestlers threw other wrestlers while tables were breaking. One of the wrestlers speaks through the airplane's announcer, announcing that they were going to die. Once Brock and Curt almost opened the emergency door, they stopped because if it was open, they could have gotten out of the plane without parachutes. Terri recalled in the episode of an incident that happened between her and Brock. She said that Brock exposed himself to her when the pay-per-view Insurrection was going on. In the episode, Terri did not tell anyone about it. Even her ex-husband Goldust told her not to sell it. Goldust, also known as Dustin, was going through a hard time as he and Terri were divorced. He was drunk the following morning and sang Pledging My Love through the public address system and had woken everyone up. Terri was going to stop Goldust, but Paul E., maybe Paul Heyman since Paul E. is a nickname he has, told Terri not to sell it. When someone says to not sell it, it means to not do anything that can cause problems in order to make things easy for the business and not face scrutiny. It's usually a word that wrestlers use among themselves. Dustin was hurting as he was having issues accepting that his marriage had been over until JR went up to Dustin and told him to sit his butt down. Meanwhile, with Ric Flair, he was flirting with the flight attendants. Rick also had a lot of issues with alcohol as he was drunk on the plane and exposed himself to everyone. Heidi and Rob Van Dam both stated that Rick spun his private part like a helicopter. While Heidi was in the galley, which is the kitchen in the plane, she said in the episode that Rick had also gone to the galley and essayed her. He does so by forcing her hand to touch his private part, as stated by Heidi. She also said that she tried to get out, but that Rick was making it hard for her to do so. RVD said in the episode that he remembered Rick crowding a flight attendant and forcing her to touch him. In a statement as seen in the episode, Ric Flair denies the allegations. Heidi recalled that Goldust helped her get out of the situation by speaking through the microphone and telling Rick to leave her alone. Minutes after that, Heidi checks on a drunk Scott Hall. At the time, Scott was still dealing with substance issues, so Heidi tried to offer him breakfast only for him to wake up angry. Scott was not in a good state once he had woken up, so he grabbed Heidi's shirt as told by Heidi and pulled her down. She remembered her shirt buttons being ripped off and that he was going to lick her, but never did as Scott passed out, making Heidi feel violated. In audio interviews, Scott said that Kurt might have spiked Halcyon in his drink. After that incident, Heidi said that she went to the galley and never left from there, nor served any more alcohol, as she said that she feared for her life. In a statement seen in the episode, Scott said that he had no recollection of the events that had happened on that flight. The flight was 14 hours up in the air, and once they landed, the plane was trashed with blankets, pillows, cups, and food on the floor. The flight attendants were worried that Scott might have died as he was still passed out once the plane had landed. Justin Credible said that he had to pick Scott up and put him in a wheelchair so that Scott could get off the plane. He put sunglasses on Scott and had to speak on Scott's behalf to the airport customs. When Michael had woken up, he was very angry as he realized that his ponytail was gone. Once the wrestlers got out of the plane, Heidi said that the plane was filled with vomit, syringes, and blood as she refused to clean it up. Back to Jim Ross, he said that the FBI were waiting for the WWE employees once they had landed. He took ownership and fault for the incident as he was in charge of the wrestlers. Vince was said to be unhappy about the situation. He told JR to fire people who have caused trouble on board. JR fired Kurt as Vince had enough of his pranks, as well as Scott, because of his addiction issues. Dustin was probably fined, but his contract with WWF ended in 2003. Rick, on the other hand, got a pass as he was WWF's huge star. Heidi said that when she took a shower after the plane ride, she cried. She ended up calling SportsJet, but they told her to keep it to herself as the wrestlers were professional athletes and that the flight attendants had to respect their clients. Heidi had a hard time telling her husband and wanted to sue WWF, but her husband told her to take the settlement money that they had offered her instead of taking it to the public in order to protect their daughter. She said in the episode that another flight attendant had something similar happen to her on the plane ride. Her husband was supportive to Heidi receiving the settlement, but Heidi said that she felt shame and guilt for not telling the truth. Terri said that if she filed a lawsuit against WWF on everything that she went through, she would be in court her whole life. Tommy Dreamer said that Heidi should have never taken the money if she felt guilty and should have gone public with her story. Once the wrestlers were at Raw, Michaels' ponytail was in a sandwich bag and taped to the locker rooms. JR then took the bag and threw it away. Days after the plane ride, WWF immediately changed to WWE, and JR said that it was the beginning of a new culture and a new era, as we all know that the Ruthless Aggression era was making its way shortly after the new WWE name was released. RVD said to never meet your heroes. Tommy said that he does not recall ever seeing Rick force himself on anyone, and that anyone gets offended by anything men do, especially his double ponytail. Heidi thinks that Rick was probably not going to R-word her on the plane, but she said that it affected her as she could not sleep well the following day of the altercation. She said that she wanted to tell her story but was afraid of getting picked on or getting ridiculed. In the end, she said that the truth should always be told and would tell her story more times if it helped other people. Interviewers for this episode are Jim Ross, Tommy Dreamer, Terri Runnels, Rob Van Dam, PJ Polacco, aka Justin Credible, Heidi Doyle, former flight attendant, and Mike Chioda, WWE referee. Some facts that I found out on YouTube was that Eddie Guerrero, Big Show, Triple H, the Hardy Boys, Booker T, Crash Holly, Spike Dudley, William Regal, Trish Stratus, Molly Holly, Jacqueline, Chaz, Deborah, Paul Heyman, Dave Finlay, Jerry Lawler, Arn Anderson, John Laurinaitis, Gerald Briscoe, and other referees were also in the plane ride from hell, as heard by the Cultaholic wrestling video that I watched. Supposedly Scott was also doing pranks with Kurt. Finlay, Heyman, and Triple H had to separate Kurt and Brock from further escalating things. Goldust spilled tobacco dip on the floor. Jim Ross was head of talent relations during that time, which I did not know. After Michael Hayes hit Bradshaw, Bradshaw hit Hayes back, knocking him out cold throughout the whole flight, possibly. In the first class area, Michael almost peed on Linda. When X-Pac put Michael's ponytail at the locker rooms, he supposedly had a sign that read auction. Freebird ponytail. Proceeds benefit Alcoholics Anonymous. Arn Anderson, Gerald Briscoe, and Michael also got punished for not looking after the wrestlers. Stone Cold Steve Austin and Deborah watched the movie and were not a part of the chaos that erupted. Since the flight, JR said in his book that WWE had banned alcohol from flights. In a shoot interview, X-Pac said that there was also GHB on the plane. It was said that Michael was very abusive towards everyone given the position he had. In Dutch Montel's YouTube channel, JBL said that there was a knife stuck at the airplane's wall. JBL also said that Curt Hennig punched him as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but supposedly Vince and Kurt Angle had a match on the plane. Vince was obsessed with trying to get a pin on Angle for some reason, and I think when Kurt almost beat Vince, Undertaker chipped in to stop Kurt from hurting Vince any further. I remember hearing it from Matt Hardy in a video clip on YouTube talking about this weird situation in the WWE YouTube channel. Undertaker choked Kurt for hurting Vince, but I don't know if it was the same flight or maybe it was a different one. As of today, a majority of the wrestlers who were on that plane have either retired or went on to other wrestling companies, some going to AEW. Vince McMahon is no longer the CEO of WWE as he was accused of SA and trafficking. Tommy Dreamer is currently in TNA, Goldust is currently in AEW and is set to retire soon. Michael Hayes was let go of WWE recently as it is rumored that it might have to do something with Vince's case. Justin Credible might be retiring this year. Terri Runnels got arrested in 2019 for bringing a loaded gun to the airport, but said that she did not know that she had it with her. She also said that she never wanted to be a wrestler. Currently, Terri is doing philanthropic work. Brock Lesnar was accused of almost trafficking as Vince was trying to get him and a woman named Janelle Grant to spend time together so that Brock could allegedly stay with WWE longer. He has not been seen much except attending one of his daughter's sports events. It is rumored that he might come back for Survivor Series this year, but who knows. RVD and his wife released a website called Only Wrestlers, which is a place where his fans can connect with him and his wife. He also has his own podcast on YouTube. In an article on ITR Wrestling, RVD stated that what he said in the episode was misrepresented. Rob also said that Vice had edited his interview to make it seem like he did see Rick forcing Heidi to touch his private part. It was because of that experience on Dark Side of the Ring that RVD refused to be interviewed for the Mr. McMahon Netflix documentary. Heidi Doyle was said to have stolen $80,000 of jewelry in an Encinitas, California store in 2016 with a guy. She turned herself in, yet also had charges in identity theft and writing fake checks. Terri said in an interview that she has seen Rick naked all the time but has never done anything to her or anyone. Scott Hall has passed away recently. He passed away on March 14, 2022. Scott fell and broke his hip pretty badly. There was a blood clot after he had undergone hip replacement surgery and had 3 strokes before they pulled the plug on him. I heard that Scott was supposed to have a Dark Side of the Ring episode, but he died before he got to be interviewed. His friend X-Pac, real name Sean Waltman, said that Scott relapsed due to the COVID-19 lockdown before he died. After being fired, Curt Hennig passed away on February 10, 2003, due to intoxication. He was 44 years old, about to turn 45. As for Ric Flair, he has released a statement regarding the episode and calls it BS in his podcast. WWE took action by removing his merchandise and appearances for a while since the episode had aired. They even took out any mention of the plane ride from hell. Currently, WWE have put back Rick on their brand and was one of the speakers for the WWE Hall of Fame in 2023. I was actually there when he was inducting the Great Muta in Los Angeles. However, Rick has always gotten himself into trouble since the airing of the episode. This episode is one of them, but wait until you see the next episode. He was at a restaurant recently this year and called an employee the P word while being drunk. Rick has also worked with the marijuana business and got divorced from his 5th wife this year. Unfortunately, Rick's stepson, Sebastian Kidder, recently took his life as he was 24. He shared a tribute to him on Instagram. Rick also lost his son Reed in 2013 at the age of 25. It seems that trouble always seems to follow Rick. I give this episode a 10 out of 10 as it was shocking watching it the first time, but interesting. 3 years have passed and it seems like cancel culture did not work its way in this situation. On one side, I do feel bad for Heidi, but on the other, she did steal jewelry, which is not okay. Maybe Heidi was going through a hard time and could not find work for a long period of time. But I do feel bad for her. When you're SA'd, it just never goes away from your memory, no matter how much you try to regress it. How do I know? I myself was almost SA'd, and the person who almost touched me inappropriately got away with it. Unfortunately, the police could not do anything about it, as they said that I was the one that instigated it. I will say that I tend to put a lot of trust in people, but it is what it is, unfortunately. You learn to move forward with the help of therapy. Heidi wasn't the only one, as there was another woman who went through the same thing as she did. Let's be real, when you get a bunch of wrestlers in an open space, and they're all drunk, something bad is bound to happen, especially with all the testosterone and steroids flying around. I think Rick might have gotten so drunk on that flight, but he has been known to be a party animal, and the alcohol was probably spiked. At the end of the day, this is a lose-lose situation, but I do think that something had happened to those flight attendants. RBD's opinions on this episode were probably true considering he smokes pot and those stoners don't hold back. But what do you guys think? Also, I haven't forgotten the way that Tommy Dreamer talked in this episode. It was such a jerk move, especially for women who try to share their story. Whether or not Heidi's story was true, sometimes talking about trauma is very hard. It's also one of the reasons why women don't come forward soon enough. He's such a jerk, but so is Rick, as you'll find out in the next episode review. I think that RVD and Terri trying to defend Rick was a way to save face of the WWE company. There's always this loyalty that these wrestlers have among each other. Don't believe me? Watch the Mr. McMahon documentary on Netflix, as wrestlers like Undertaker, John Cena, and Trish seem to praise Vince even after everything. I'm not a therapist, but a lot of these wrestlers seem to have some sort of Stockholm syndrome. Although I still watch WWE sometimes. Poor JR, imagine handling these muscular roid rage wrestlers in a plane. I don't blame him, but I do think Vince should have done something or disciplined the wrestlers hard. Especially Rick. The whole favoritism plays a role on who they punished in this episode. Overall, it was such a big mess. Did you guys like this episode, or do you think Heidi was telling the truth? I think there is truth to it since Rick has a track record, but she did steal jewelry years later on, so it's difficult to comprehend who's right or who's wrong. It's always important to hear everyone's side of the story though. But thank you guys for watching this video, and take care of your mental health and everyone around you, and I'll do the same too. Bye guys.